and I am on my Skype page, and I've got Artistic Layman. So, Luke, how you doing?
Hello, everyone. How you doing, Pastor?
I'm doing good, doing good. Yeah, I streamed earlier today, but I wanted to stream again, and so this might be the time when we kind of start streaming on Thursdays. I know I said earlier that we were going to try to do earlier in the afternoon, but this might be work out a little bit better. It works out better for me because my daughter's already asleep, so it works out like I said, doing this once she's gone to bed. Um, so that way I can kind of instead of having to shuffle around my work schedule, I can just kind of do this. So that works out well. So the election is still going on. What we want to talk about, I want to talk a little bit, obviously, about the election. I want to talk about kind of some of the things going into the election, kind of how we got here from 2016. Again, kind of talk about responses to sort of this election and kind of what's happened in evangelical Christian world. Lessons learned, whether Trump wins or loses. What are the lessons that you learned from him? Versus gains, losses. And then, of course, going forward. So that'll kind of be a lot of the topics that we talk about. But it's just starting out, going into it. Luke, what do you think of the election so far? That's still going on.
It's a kind of the result. The delayed results are affecting me in many ways. First of all, well, obviously, it's like astonishing that it is as close as it is. I'm a little disappointed. I want like a landslide for Trump, which I guess that didn't happen. But the way it's cutting close is really interesting and really provocative, like very provocative for me, because it's basically disenchanted me with any kind of legitimacy from my enemies. I'm tempted to say that I can never trust a dim is my new motto, but I can't. But I know I can't really hold that position. But it is. And the reason, like, for example, you see my avatar with my MAGA cap, I've decided to keep that. I'm going to just keep that because regardless of who wins the election, this is the political stand I'm going to hold to, because it's just the last 4 years have been so incredible and so interesting and so unusual. That's just something I don't want to forget about. It's something I want to hold on until for the rest of the for the remainder as long as I exist in America.
Yeah. Wow. It's been a little bit similar to me. I was kind of thinking that this would be a little bit more of a landslide than it was, which again, that's something to analyze. I guess what that would probably mean now, I guess the first question to ask is, do you think that there's any election fraud going on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, does the sun shine?
So, out of the votes cast for Biden, what percentage would you say are legitimate versus fraud? And you're just kind of guessing. What percentage?
I'm
like 10%, 30% fraud, 10% fraud, 90% accurate.
I can't say to those percentages, but I'm pretty certain that those 100,000 that just came in the middle of the night are all fraudulent.
Yeah, that does seem really odd. Again, I kind of marked on this on Twitter. The fact that everyone just sort of assumes that any ballots to be counted are going to go towards Biden, that should really tell us something. That everyone's just kind of assuming, oh, well, anything that comes in at this point is just going to go to Biden. Again, that should tell us something. That's just kind of been the assumption that everyone's working on.
It would be one thing if like Trump won in a similar way last year, like he was on like there was a steady polling and all of a sudden a bunch of votes came for him, and then the people on the left would say, oh, that's just as similar as before. Like, no, this doesn't happen like this. In fact, this is actually pretty much how it went with Kirsten Sinema in Arizona, basically the communist in Arizona, and how it's possibly that Mark Kelly did the same way. But Arizona's still up in the air even though it's been declared.
Right, and see, the Arizona being declared so early by Fox was weird. They were declaring it before even any of the end-day votes had been cast. What's weird is that they've gone ahead and called that with 80% still, only 80% of the votes, or 88% of the votes counted, but Georgia's got 99%, still haven't called it. North Carolina has got 100%, still haven't called it.
They did this with Florida and Texas, and they were very clear, which is kind of unusual because Florida never really calls this quickly, but Florida just got their results right away. But Texas and Florida, they just took their time in responding to it. And I like what there's two comedians that appeared on Crowder's stream, and they said, we're pretty much Trump has won, they're just messing with us.
Yeah. The Hodge twins.
Yeah, that's them.
Yeah, they were pretty funny. Yeah, it's really weird. This whole thing has just kind of been an unusual. Again, the fact that it's been taking this long just to count the ballots, it's not like we're contesting anything at this point. We're still counting. We're still counting ballots. That's odd. The high voter turnout. I mean, I figured there would be high voter turnout, to be sure. It's just, again, the whole thing is everything with this is really odd.
Like 105% turnout. That's a little
Yeah,
interesting.
some places are having that.
Like all
It's
the contested states right now have like either 90% up to 115%. Like really? Are we
right.
really going to be okay with this?
Got to give that 110%. They meant
And
that
I
when they
just
said
love
that.
how, and it's so interesting how the left are really okay with this. Like, you mean to tell me that Sleepy Joe is going to get more black votes than the first black president? Really?
Well, I mean, I guess, he would if there was more turnout, right? But it's still just kind of odd that he's inspiring that level, right? So, I mean, I guess the argument that they're going to go with is that, well, it's, Trump is just so hated that so many people are just showing up to vote against him. But I don't know. To me, that's still just a hard sell, right? I mean, and of course, what that would mean is that the propaganda machine of the mainstream media is much more effective than people gave it credit for.
Yeah, and if these people are going to expect me to just accept the results, you guys, you haven't accepted the results for the last 4 years. I can at least wait another month.
Right, and that's the thing with that too, is that, we spent 3 years going through this whole Russian collusion thing with no evidence of that whatsoever. I think we can do some looking into for voter fraud. That seems, again, wouldn't you want to know, right? I mean, like I said, whether you thought Trump was guilty or not, you still wanted to know. If he was guilty, great. Then let's arrest him or whatever. If he was guilty of the Russian stuff. Same thing with the voter fraud. If Biden wins by fair and square, okay, cool, right? But yeah, I want to make sure because I think there are a lot of flaws here. Again, I've never understood what's wrong with having any type of ID system. You could do it based off of social security numbers. You go in, you put in your social security number, you vote. There, you don't need any kind of ID or anything like that.
It really points out, because I never really thought of the logistics of how voting, because basically the equivalent of voting is basically putting a person's name on a card and putting it in a box. But the difference is the box is hundreds of miles away, and there's so much chicanery you can do with that, even if you put your name in a specifically made envelope.
Right.
Like it's like it really because in Arizona we still have like physical ballots and physical paper, but there's just so much you can do with that because there's just no, after you take it out of the envelope or put it in the envelope, there's no other way to verify these things.
Yeah, it'd be nice if you could get a kind of receipt too, so that way you could back it up, be like, okay, yes, I don't know, that like there's got to be there's got to be a more secure way of doing this. And of course, again, right, they're saying, well, there's never any evidence of voter fraud. It's like, but we haven't, number one, we haven't done mail-in ballots before, so that's not the same thing as absentee ballots, so that's reason enough to look into it. And then again, with the high level of voter turnout and some of the discrepancies that we're seeing, yeah, it just makes sense. Just look into it.
Yeah, it's. I wanted to. Oh, I was going to say something about. I mentioned before about how the whole situation has kind of disenchanted me with any kind of honesty with my opposition. Because that's what I wanted to say. Because it's really interesting. Because this is kind of off subject topic, but one of the major talking points of atheists about not believing in Christ is that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, and hundreds of people actually rose from the dead with him. People would believe it. They would write about it. And yet, right now, I'm talking face to face with people who not only firmly believe that Trump is a Russian agent, but there's no irregularity going on here. Like, yeah, I'm reasonably certain that people can deny the existence of a raised person too. It's like it's like a interesting test.
Yeah. Luke, you still there? Uh-oh. We're losing Luke. Oh no. Hang in there, Luke. Oh, jeez. Yeah, if you can hear me, just kind of picking up on Luke's point, right? Yeah.
Did you lose me there?
Oh, okay, now you're back.
Where did I cut off at?
Basically, just you can kind of see why, if people are, if they think Trump's a Russian agent and they think, these elections, oh, there's no problem here, everything's fine. How are you?
Oh, yeah, it's only like a one-for-one comparison by how atheists say, well, if someone actually rose from the dead and hundreds of people rose from the dead, people would write about it. Like, would they really? Like,
Well,
seriously?
they did write about it.
Yeah, but no, the non-partisan people have to write about it.
Right, and of course, again, right, that, of course, you're comparing what's happening now with social media, with cameras, all that kind of stuff, to what was happening way back then, right? Where it was, a lot of it was just word of mouth, and of course, again, 2,000 years ago, it's a very long time, and yet people, there's people that won't even be convinced of the riots happening. They'll look back 10 years from now, oh no, there weren't any riots. What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. They're mostly peaceful protests.
It is very surreal in many ways. Like, I know the last 4 years of having Donald Trump as a TV show host as a president has always been a very surreal experience for people. But the way the opposition reacts to Trump is weird. It is just bizarre.
It is, and I mean, to me, the biggest thing that I guess I have a hard time is that you can see how the Democrats have been acting. You can see the riots been caused, and the idea of thinking, well, that's like not wanting to punish them for that, right? Not wanting to be like, this is how you're treating your states. It's just hard for me to. I mean, again, maybe that's what's happened, but it's hard for me to believe that they can see that level of just hatred for your own people. And just using them like that. Again, especially like with black voters, hearing how Biden talks to minority voters, right? Hispanics, blacks, Latinos, like hearing how he talks to them. It's just like how can you vote for this guy? Like, again, I get not wanting to vote for Trump. I don't get the turnout for Biden. That's the thing that I'm having a harder time with is just he's pulled in such turnout.
Yeah, not to mention like whether it be Joe Biden looking to the Breakfast Club and saying, if you don't know who to vote for and not for me, then you ain't black,
right.
Or going to a Hispanic audience and playing a Hispanic song off his phone, like really, people vote for this? Like, I mean, even if we assume the large portion of the vote for Joe Biden is fraudulent, people voted for this.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, there's another one where Biden was at I think he was doing a town hall, and somebody asked him a question. He said he was talking about immigration. He said, if somebody commits a violent felon, then yeah, we're going to send them back. Which, I mean, okay, it's a reasonable position, right? But then people were having a problem with that, and a Hispanic person was asking about that, and he's like, well, you know what? Just don't vote for me, then vote for Trump. I mean, it's like, wait a minute. I mean, really, this guy's just asking you a question. He's just wanting you to, clarify. Like, he's just asking an honest question, but just completely shut him down. Of course, again, I guess he talks to white people that way too, right? He calls them, dog face, pony show, and wants to challenge them to a push-up contest.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's him slowly entering the early stages of dementia, or just his self-righteous elitist attitude. Because keep in mind, this is the guy who was on the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings, right, along with all the people who were accusing Clarence Thomas of being a sexual predator. Like,
Yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest mistakes going into this were not attacking Biden more directly. And I guess they were afraid that it was going to look like they were beating up on a dementia person or something. But I mean, people should have really been going back and pulling out these older clips of Biden and letting people see who he is. If you go back and you look at how Biden really is, I don't know. I wouldn't think as many people would want to vote for him. Again, looking at some of his actual policies, looking at number one, what does he have to say about gun control? Hammering hard the fact that he would want to put Beto O'Rourke in charge of that, right? And I mean, the guy, heck yes, we're coming for your AR-15s. I mean, when we've seen gun sales go up so much, it would seem like that would be a slam dunk issue. But there wasn't as much of that.
Yeah.
I didn't see as many of those types of ads and many of those types of things. It was mostly focused on the riots and that kind of stuff, which I think in hindsight could have been a mistake.
Of course, and then at the very end, the whole story was about Facebook and Twitter's deciding to not talk about Hunter Biden, which is
right.
That is I mean, if Trump Jr. had something even remotely connected to that, it would have been news. And this is not news. It's like, it's clearly this it's almost cartoonishly movie to the degree. It's almost like we're dealing with someone who's clearly an elitist, arrogant person, American person. It's like amazing.
Yeah. So, but
I'm sure the mudding of the water always plays with, well, if the roles reversed, Republicans would have done the same. Would we really? I mean, are we really the same as we were back with George W. Bush?
Yeah, no.
Even Barack Obama, even. I don't remember people going this nuts, right-wingers going this nuts with Barack Obama. Well, yeah, there was the exaggeration. That was the exaggeration of he's going to make president for life and all that, which is, yeah, that's always a concern. But it's not. I mean, you guys are starting riots and protests constantly.
Well, right. I mean, there was a Tea Party, but there was not these consistent riots. And anytime anybody did do anything, Republicans were very quick to denounce it. Yeah, you had some people, he's a Muslim spy or all this kind of stuff. And I mean, you had like Glenn Beck got real popular during that and everything. And of course, again, Obama did a lot of damage to the nation, which that's another thing is that people, it's like, you were not happy with President Barack Obama, how the country was going, but you're going to hire his vice president. You're going to vote for him. And again, like I said, there's all this stuff that's just so odd about this. Like, I mean, with Trump, you could look at it in 2016, and be like, well, there was a whole lot going against him, sure, and people didn't like Hillary, but there was a lot going for Trump too. People were really on board with what he was talking about with his policies back in 2016. But who's really on board with? I mean, what are Biden's policies? Who's on board with them? He would flip-flop a number of times. Is he for fracking or against fracking? Is he for the Green New Deal or is he not for the Green New Deal? It's just, again, what is it that's, other than just Trump, right, being anti-Trump, what is it that is compelling about Biden? And I guess, like I said, if this was a legitimate election and Biden were to win, it really would be just a testament to how well the media can still lie about people.
And that's really what's and that's the thing that's not only concerning but also relieving for me, because if Biden does win, because I'm convinced that Trump is going to win, I'm convinced Trump should win, and if Biden wins, either the Republic is lost in the media, controls the will of the people, in which case, okay, I'm just going to work on the individual, be the political figure of the individual on the individual basis, like worry about your politics locally, and then maybe you'll get up to the upper big grades.
Right.
I want to articulate. I really want to articulate this more because I feel. I know no one cares about your feelings. I know, but I feel as though I am more confident and aware and certain about my political stances and my political positions. I mean, Beckloff has been going on over and over again on the streams. Like, you have to, at this time, this is the time where you have to just know where you're going to where the hill is you're going to die on.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's. I see a lot of people talking, I mean, and it is important to know, right? It's important to know the hill that you're willing to die on. And again, trying to take other enemy hills, right? That sort of seems the thing, is everyone wants, that's one of my biggest problems with, I guess, conservatives, and it's kind of in the name, right? It's kind of baked in with the name. It's always about conserving, but that's always puts you on the defensive, and again, we need to be more proactive rather than what are we pushing for, right? I mean, what's the direction? Because that was one of the biggest lessons that I think I sort of learned from Trump, is he was on the offensive. It was the push back. It wasn't just the with holding against it or anything like that. It was, no, we're pushing back. We're actually going somewhere. And so that's why people, they weren't really wanting, the MAGA, Make America Great, right? We're going to make America great again. Well, I mean, that's doing something. That's proactive. That's where I would say that, the conservatives really need to alter their branding in that way, right? I mean, you can still call yourself conservative if you want that, that kind of namesake. But again, where are you going? Because you haven't conserved anything. And again, what's there left to conserve? I mean, at this point, you'd have to, you're conserving basically more leftist policies. I mean, are you conserving the prison system? Are you conserving the high taxes? Are you, what is it you're conserving? You haven't
the conservative would make sense if we actually knew what the Constitution.
Right. I mean,
again,
culturally, what?
Am I breaking apart again? I can't tell.
A little bit, but you've come back.
But yeah, it's conservative would have made sense if people knew what the Constitution was and having having a conservative interpretation of the Constitution. But people treat I mean, everyone's technically in favor of the Constitution. It's just a matter of how they have the holistic view, quote unquote holistic view of it. Because some say the Constitution is I think the best analogy between the conservative and the liberal is that the liberal sees. It's like a horse-driven carriage. The conservatives see
Skype, man. Luke, you still there?
I'm still here. Oh, dang it. This connection is terrible.
I know.
I'm not sure. I wonder if it's me or something. I wonder if it's a version of Skype because Skype has been very flaky.
Yeah, Skype. Oof. We need to find something else out. We'll figure something else out to where it's a little bit better. There's got to be a better way to get connected. But anyway, yeah. like I said, I mean, I guess I'm speaking a little bit more culturally. I mean, politically, we could kind of do that, but I mean, culturally, again, what direction is the culture going? Because at this point, there really isn't anything culturally left that conservatives could say that they'd want to conserve. Marriage, I mean, we're not. We failed at conserving that. Traditional values. You failed at conserving that. Christian values failed at conserving that. Again and again and again. So again, there's you've lost all the ground. Now it's the only thing really left that you have is just yourself. So in my opinion, it's like, okay, well, time to scrap this, start over, and start taking ground. I mean, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really want I am kind of nostalgic for the political attitudes that were around when I was a child, where it was very clear that we're fighting for. Of course, it's kind of like before I understood libertarianism. Like everyone's fighting for their position in the state, where everyone's going to say, "Yeah, we're going to have the state, and we're going to preserve our culture, or we're going to have the state, and we're going to forgo the past to have the greater future." But now it's like everyone's kind of gone into the whole libertarian mode, like a very lazy-going libertarian mode, where you just have to be tolerant. Just be tolerant of all things. Just assume everything's going to work out in the end. And I guess that's part of the whole individual basis, because you have to instill these things in yourself, because you can't trust the government institution to do it for you.
yeah, and I mean, I think having dealt with just such an authoritarian government, that's pushed people to being more libertarian as well. Whether you're on the left or the right, when you deal with a government that is incredibly authoritarian, you're not going to want to give it power to do that. So you're not going to want to push things on a cultural level. You'll just sort of be like, well, whatever, just everyone just leaves everybody else alone. you know. And of course, that's the easier option too. It's easy to just leave somebody alone as opposed
The
to change
local
their mind.
maybe you could have that conservation in a local. The federal government's intruding on that, because there's not real room for freedom of association.
Yeah, I didn't get much of that. Dang. Skype, man. Jeez Louise. All right. Well, so
We're being canceled. I mean, canceled out in real time.
yeah, no joke. I don't know. Well, it was weird. I was streaming earlier today. Like the power just went out. Like I just lost power for like I don't know 5 minutes right when I was in the middle. I was streaming. So, but bitrate. I mean, again, I think from what we're streaming, it's still fine here. So it's just something with Skype. We'll find something else out for next time. But culturally speaking, I guess. What would you say would be the biggest lessons to learn from Trump? Win or lose with the election, what would you say are the most important lessons going forward for political and cultural engagement that you learned from Trump?
I mean, Razor Fist always says it over and over again, is that the biggest gift that Trump has given is that if you stand your ground, you can actually fight back and win, which is something like the stereotype of the modern day Republican is that we must be polite and good and just and fair. But you have to understand, your opposition isn't going to play fair. You have to stand your ground. You have to hold up what you believe in.
Yeah, absolutely right. Basically, before Trump, the Republicans were, they complain and then they don't do anything. I mean, again, well, we're going to complain about voter fraud, but we're not going to do anything about it. The Democrats really shouldn't be doing this, but then we're not going to do anything to try to stop it. We're just going to sit there and complain. And if we're accused of anything, we'll just, we'll immediately go on the defensive. And of course, we'll immediately backtrack. We'll immediately try to qualify everything that we're saying. Which I think was one of the big lessons for me, is when you're dealing with someone that's going to be completely dishonest, and no matter what, there's really no point in trying to get them to understand by repeatedly qualifying your position with them. They're always going to misrepresent your position. They're never going to represent it honestly. So the best thing that you can try to do is to be as clear as you can for the people in the middle who are willing to hear you out, and just ignore the people who, no matter what you say, they're always going to assume the worst about it. But
I guess for this whole time I've been trying to say that Donald Trump is for our generation what Ronald Reagan was for our parents' generation. And I think that still holds true today.
Yeah, but I guess what I hope doesn't happen though is that the leadership that brought us to Bush and brought us to Obama, that doesn't take hold again. Like if Trump loses, I think that would be my biggest concern. Because I think I think we could weather Biden. I mean, it's possible he could just completely wreck the country, but truth being told here, I think you could probably weather him, especially with the Republicans holding the Senate. I just think a lot of what he would want to do would kind of be DOA. But
I mean, he will be pretty much in a few months.
yeah, I mean, if he again, that's seeing how he makes it. But it just. But what would be really concerning is if people went back to the older way of doing this. Like, well, obviously Trump doesn't work. Obviously, because there have been significant gains made, and there is a new culture here. It's like he put us back into the fight. I mean, I think a lot of people are just sort of co-signed to just like, well, okay, well, the country's just going down the hill. Very, and I think that's the other thing is not being so defeatist. It's like you get into an argument and somebody punches you, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm done. You win. That's no way to fight.
Yeah, and that is like it was a real confidence boost. Like Donald Trump is the first person I ever voted for that actually won the presidency, and that's like invigorating. It's like so exciting to know that something I was actually part of the American experience and the American transformation, and that's just something I'm always going to carry with me regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I still think that generally our ideas are better. They're ultimately better. Like I said, I think they're more biblical, but I also think that they're ultimately, because of that, because they're more biblical, they're ultimately better for the nation. They're ultimately better for society at large. It's important to push on those ideas. It's important to continue to promote them, to continue to put them out there, to continue to try to reason with people where you can, and then push forward policies that help to reinforce them. And I guess that's one of the things too. I talked about this on another little video I did about with Christians and voting, and to me, a lot of Christians have really been sort of making a horrible, making it way too complex. For me, Christianity and politics is like this. Okay, when you're dealing with the American system like you have, Christians can be involved in it, but you don't necessarily have to. It would be a good thing because I think it's an issue of stewardship. God's given you a vote, so you should use it because that's part of being a good steward of your nation. But essentially, when you're looking at the politicians, which politicians are going to help you, are going to assist the church in its goal to further the kingdom of God, and then you vote for that person. If they're going to reduce barriers to speech, making it easier for you to get into places and to preach the gospel, hey, great. If they're going to do things that are ultimately going to make it easier for the church to be involved in the community, promoting fellowship and these, very great. And then who not to vote for, right, is someone who's going to put up roadblocks to the church in its goal to further the kingdom of God. So if somebody's like, well, we don't want church to have anything to do with schools, or, we're going to have hate speech laws, we're going to do all these various things, right? It's like, well, or we're going to have these things, we're going to put up these laws that are pushing a particular worldview that is counter to Scripture, and we're going to be endorsing it. We're going to give them all of these kind of things that will push the culture in a particular direction. You shouldn't vote for that person.
And which is actually it's actually an inversion of the old phrase that you're voting for the lesser of two evils. You're technically voting for the greater of two possible goods.
Right.
Which is actually a great segue to the little article from Piper.
Yeah, I don't have it. We'll have to look at it another time.
Oh no, you don't have it?
No, I thought before the stream we decided not to talk about it, but I must have misunderstood.
Oh yeah, because the thing is, well, it's just not very practical because it's kind of like a deviation, that is truly a divergence from the discussion we're having, because Piper is kind of well, he retweet. It's an article he posted in 1995 about an article called "One Issue Politics, One Issue Marriage, and Humane Society," and he's trying to use it to say that why he didn't support either Biden or Trump. I was like, that's just not practical, Mr. Piper. With all due respect, Mr. Piper, that's just not practical from a political standpoint.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, if you don't feel like you can vote for either candidate, then that's fine. I certainly understand that. I think, like I said, I can see certainly why people would support Trump and would vote for Trump. I don't really see the Christians who can support Biden. Even if you agree with some of the economic things that he wants to do, even if you feel like, well, they're going to put forward these policies in place, which we'll definitely need to talk about. Though we'll need to talk about the myth that abortion goes down under Democratic administrations, because it is a myth. It's something they like to put out there, but it's sort of like the 3,000 denomination thing. Like it's fun, easy to say, and a lot of people like to believe it, but it's really not true. But even if you liked that, there are a number of other deal breakers when it comes to the Democratic platform that run counter to the church's goals. And so why would you vote for an organization? Number one, why would you vote for somebody who is actively hostile against you? I mean, President Obama was hostile to the church. I mean, when you were having a number of Christians who were being killed, he goes on there, he's like, well, hey, let's not forget about the Crusades, right? And the Spanish Inquisition. So, I mean, for real.
Those chestnuts, really?
It was a constant, he was constantly going after the church from the bully pulpit. So why would you want to support someone that was their VP? And I mean, again, he can try to talk about his faith all day long. Yeah, right. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm talking about his faith. I'll believe his faith when I actually see his faith in action. But it just, like I said, I mean, their platform runs in so many different ways counter to what the church is wanting to do. So to me, I could never ever vote for it, because it would really be voting against the church's interest and my own interest. But so any other major lessons that you think you've learned from Trump?
Oh, in regards to the election, or
yeah, just kind of going forward and kind of dealing with culture and whatnot.
Well, I mean, just recapping, but just
Sheesh Louise. Well, I don't know what's going on with this right now, people. I'm sorry about this. Oy. Skype connection's terrible. Why does Skype have to... Man.
Oh, did I cut out again?
Man, yeah, bad. You just came back in. We didn't get
so
anything.
To recap, whether you like him or not, Trump has effectively changed the whole game, and I say, thank God that he did.
All right. I'd say one other lesson that I learned is, what we're seeing right now, from what I understand. Now, this could obviously change if Biden wins, if they're able to get more of their way. But what we're seeing right now, this is like final form, ultimate level. This is the left at their best. They've thrown everything they have at Trump. This is their best shot. And so...
Oh, and I was 5 years ago. Someone made a promotional thing for Trump where they used the camera. They used the song from Twisted Sister. We're not going to take it anymore.
Right. And
one of the lines is your goal is never ending. Your confidence and life is jading, always confiscated. If this is your best won't do.
Right. In 2016, I don't think that it was their best. Right. I think they underestimated him. I think that they weren't able to really pull it together quick enough to do the kind of damage that they need to do. But they've been 4 years of nothing but just Trump's horrible, worst person ever, Nazi, all this kind of stuff. Over and over and over again. So, and like I said, they've pulled out all the stops that they could. They have tried everything in the world that they can. So, to me, this is their best. And we can, if we can get this close, and most likely, again, if there is voter fraud going on, and beat their best, then yeah, But this is their best. This is where we need to pay attention, because this is the best that they've got.
Yeah, here it is more accurately. Oh, you're so condescending. Your gall is never ending. We don't want nothing and not a thing from you. Your life is trite and jaded, boring and confiscated. And if that's your best won't do. And it's just so amazing that I, as the stodgy, traditional conservative person, can say those things unironically.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that would be the final lesson that I would say that we really need to learn from Trump, which is have fun. And that would be the best thing that Trump's really taught the Conservative Party, is to have fun.
He's always having fun.
All right, he's always, and again, that's the thing. People like to have fun, and if you're the party that's having fun, then people want to be a part of that. Don't be this. Like that was the other thing, is like before conservatives, they were the straight-laced, serious, kind of party. Like, the only kind of fun that was allowed would be like dad jokes, right? Which again, I ain't got a problem with dad jokes. But it's okay to actually have some fun. It's okay to put some memes out there, and so the fact that that's become a part of who we are now is a good thing,
Yeah. And it is amazing that our professional entertainers have lost their sense of humor.
Oh, man. Well, if Biden does win, it's going to get even worse, right? Because, at least with Trump, they could try to make fun of him, right? So they could try to be funny in making fun of him. But with Biden, of course, they won't make fun of him.
And they sucked at it too.
Oh,
it should be easy to make fun of Donald Trump, but they just don't know how to do it right. I mean, the best we did was Ben Affleck. It was not Ben Affleck. What's his name? Baldwin. Baldwin. Yeah, Alec Baldwin, and even then, the audience got tired of it after a couple of months. Like, at least make some fun of something else.
Well, right. I mean, it's you can make fun of the way that he talks and that kind of stuff, but I mean, there's really nothing. Like I said, Biden, there's a lot that you can make fun of there. There's a lot you can make fun of with Kamala Harris, but they're not going to do it. They won't do it. And I think that will also, what red pilled me in a lot of ways, because I was sort of more for. Like, I didn't vote initially for Obama, right? But I was sort of more in support of him because, back when I was watching the, what is it, the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, right, and the Colbert Report, because that was on, right? I was in college, I was watching, that was super popular back then. And, they were making fun of Bush and everything like that. And of course, then when Obama won, I figured they were going to be making fun of Obama just as much, right? It would be fair. And they didn't, though. They couldn't. Right, they always treated Obama with kid gloves, and I was like, "You guys aren't being fair." Like, it's one thing to make fun of Trump, right? They were or not Trump, excuse me, Bush. You could make fun of Bush with a lot of things, and again, they were relentless. And I was like, okay, well, they'll be relentless against Obama, but then they weren't, and that's when I was like, oh, you're not just making fun of people, you just made fun of him because he's on the right, and of course, again, I think that's 2014 with Gamergate, I think a lot of people had that red pill too, where they thought, oh, well, they're going to make fun of Anita Sarkeesian, they're going to make fun of her, but they didn't. They were going after the gamers, and I think that's what woke a lot of people up, who were sort of more on the left to the bias of the media. And going forward, the mainstream media is going to continue to lose its power. It's going to continue to lose its influence.
It's gonna go ironically it's gonna go the way of the religious right, where people they're singing their chorus and no one's listening anymore.
Right. I mean, because the only people who still really watch the mainstream media are the baby boomers, and there's still a lot of them, but the baby boomers are getting older, they're dying out. The Generation X doesn't listen to mainstream media. Millennials, we're not listening at all, and the Zoomers are definitely not going to listen.
Yeah, the closest I ever get to cable television is what I see clips on the internet.
And I mean, even millennials who are leftists, they'll watch it just because they'll tell them what they want. They don't actually watch it thinking that it's legitimate news. So the integrity that they had of being news and unbiased and all this kind of stuff, it's ridiculous. Like I said, millennials on the left, they'll try to use it as a weapon, but they don't. You can tell they don't take it seriously. They don't care. Because as soon as they say something that they don't like, they're just as critical. So it it'll be a battle and of course again they got a boost in viewership and credibility because of COVID. Right? People did start to sort of pay attention again because of COVID.
Mm.
But barring something like that, like I said, they will continue, I think, to lose influence. As more and more voices come onto the phrase, you've got more and more people who are, speaking about things, sharing their minds. It's just going to have an impact, which is great. That's one of the great things about technology, about having the ability to do that. Again, I definitely relate it back to the Reformation. One of the things that really helped out the Reformation was the inventing of the printing press. That the reformers' works, like Martin Luther's works, could be printed out very quickly and could be distributed very easily, as opposed to if they still had to be handwritten.
Yeah, I mean, when he posted his 95 Theses, and people decided to just take it, this is interesting, let's publish it. It became one of the most read documents of all time up until that point.
Right, and they did that thinking that well it's kind of this is kind of controversial, right? This is going to get people interested in the printing press. But again, that was one of the things that really pushed it forward and continued to push it forward. And of course, it became harder, right? If there aren't as many documents being made, then it's easier to sort of collect them and quarantine them. But when you can start producing things very, very quickly, it's a lot harder to control that. And I think that would be the big thing, with with the internet, people can make so many videos so fast. They can just get in front of a camera and talk and put it out there. You can't control, you can censor them, you can block them, but, as we've been seeing, but
yeah,
other sides like,
yeah, it's the the enemy can do that too. But if you have something to hide, the internet will not forgive you for hiding it.
Absolutely. And I would say that would be the only other mistake that I would say, from the Trump campaign, is that he did not deal with internet censorship well enough soon enough. And I don't know if that's just because he's older and he didn't quite understand, the internet. But there's a lot of people who got kicked off for basically no reason whatsoever. And I mean, nothing would happen with it. And there's some really important voices.
As of now, Ted Cruz is the only person attacking us.
Right. And, I don't know. I mean, I want to like Ted Cruz, but the more that I see him, he just seems like a lot of talk, though. He'll talk, but then nothing happens. He'll argue with them, but then what? It doesn't ever. I mean, again, I guess you could at least give him that he is willing to sort of go after them in that sense on a verbal level. But what's after that? So
I mean, because there's not a lot of swelling support behind him either. Because I mean, I know it's one thing to be that one lone voice fighting against the corruption, but no one really seems to be coming to his aid either. Like Trump isn't, like
right.
Pence isn't, like no one's really coming. I mean, I would like to believe that after re-election, Trump will have no more concerns about re-election, so he could crack down on this. But he hasn't really touched on it.
No, he hasn't, and I think that if he had touched on it sooner, that would have helped him out. Because, the other thing would be, a little bit better pushback on some of these other stories that had, come out. Because I don't know about you, but with dealing with people, there were always three big issues that came up with Trump for why people would be opposed to him. He is racist or he's a Nazi, something along those lines. Putting children in cages. COVID-19 response. Would you say those would kind of be the three big things with you in dealing?
Well, the biggest problem I have, up until in this point, like when I'm talking to people, the biggest problem people have is all those, not just those accusations, but his tone, and it's astonishing that that's as big as a complaint about Trump is his tone.
Yeah. I see. Again, a lot of people I talk to, they didn't have as much of a problem with that. I mean, obviously they'd be like, well, he's mean. Like that would you kind of put that into, he's like mean, he's a Nazi or whatever, he's a racist. But in terms of like actual, positions, like I said, they'd be like, well, he's putting kids in cages, and then, response to the coronavirus, he's killed 200,000 people. And at least for me, I didn't really see significant debunking of those claims from a lot of what more conservative pundits. I mean,
Well, I mean, kids in cages is just that it was started by Barack Obama, and as for the coronavirus, you just can't because they say, well, Trump's in charge, therefore it's his fault.
but I mean, again, that messaging wasn't working, right? I mean, oh, well, it started by, so what, right? I mean, again, what they would say is, well, okay, but Trump's still doing it. But he's still separating people. Well, he's still putting kids in cages. So, I mean, yes, you can say that Barack Obama started it, but it's like, okay, yeah, but Trump's still doing it, right? So, I mean, again, that has to be thoroughly debunked. The idea that well, he's working to change the policy, that he's changed that policy, that's not happening as much. That this was a law that started, it was poorly enforced. There are other bad laws that are going on here, right? But again, not a lot of people were really touching that. They weren't addressing these things that really needed to be addressed. Not enough people. I think Stefan Molyneux touched on it. But I don't think, just thinking of louder voices here, I'm not necessarily watching these people, but I don't think Steven Crowder ever talked about it. I think Ben Shapiro barely talked about it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that subject, it really is a situation. It's really the biggest complaint is hypocrisy, because in order to admit that Trump is at fault, you have to admit that that you were at fault. But of course, hypocrisy never holds to the opposition.
Right? They don't care. It doesn't matter. And of course, the independent people, they don't care if the Obama administration was hypocritical, because currently, they're not the Obama administration is not the one in power. And again, for the COVID-19 pandemic, I get that it's a little bit more of a complicated situation, right? But I mean, again, really being able, okay, well, for the 200,000 deaths, again, really looking into it and saying, well, here's this is horrible. Here's how certain things could have worked out. Here's why you think how he handled, how you think he did a good job with it, right? If you want to pull to, well, he was being a president, right? He was allowing the states to do this. He was, that's a good thing, right? He's that we actually don't want him to be a dictator. We don't want him to use this as an opportunity to grab power. Instead, he's giving the states to handle this, and of course, again, that debunks the claim that he's some sort of evil Hitler, right? If he was going to if he was going to be a dictator, don't you think he would have used this crisis to grab power?
What's interesting is that when people say that, when people accuse, when I've talked to people, they said Trump is an authoritarian because of how he demonizes his opposition. That's not how that's not what authoritarian means.
No.
But that doesn't matter because the language is there. It's we're dealing with, it's the opposition becoming more and more Marxist in the sense that they will define the terms for us and say it's all, and that's what's really hard about the opposition we're having, which we mentioned before, because they've gone so assumed, and a lot of them has gone so assumed in the idea that Orange Man is bad that there is no change.
Yeah, the ability to reason with them is definitely going downhill. Do you know who Daryl Davis is?
Oh, yes. Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah, he goes out there and he can't talk to them. I mean, the guy
the guy who talks to and befriends Klansmen and gets them to give up their Klan ways cannot communicate with Antifa people.
It's amazing, and of course, again, right? I mean, I'll occasionally watch Tim Pool. I just happened to see this one because I had actually I'd actually been doing I had mentioned Daryl Davis in a sermon one time. And so that's why, I kind of saw that on the title. I kind of caught my interest. And it was just, hearing them talk about it, basically all they do is they just start chanting. You'll try to have a reasoned conversation with them and they just start chanting, something, anything. It's incredible. It's just, they just will not be reasoned with. Again, it really reminds me of, just kind of how a mob mentality is, and just, when people won't be reasoned with, like the crowds when they want to crucify Christ, right? It doesn't matter what Pilate's sitting there trying to reason with, well, this guy hasn't done anything wrong, what are you doing? And they're just crucify him, like they're just sitting there chanting.
Yeah, another great analogy for theological examples, of historical theological examples.
Right. Wow. Well, no, I mean, the up is down and right is wrong and, truth is fiction kind of thing. You can look at the arrest of Christ and, again, Jesus points out the insanity of everything that's happening there. He's like, you come to me like I'm a thief and I'm a robber and an insurrectionist. I've been in the temple every single day. Why didn't you come and arrest me then? Like, he's pointing out how crazy it is that, they're coming with armed guards. The Romans have their swords, the Jewish guards have their clubs. There's, like hundreds of people there coming to arrest Christ just for this one person. Again, treating him like he's some sort of terrorist. It's like, it's just crazy. And the insanity that, right, when Peter cuts off the high priest's servant's ear, Jesus heals him. He heals the ear. But that doesn't change anything about what they were doing. You think that if somebody, number one, if they heal you, that's pretty amazing. That, wow, maybe this person is a man of God. Why are we arresting them, right? On the other hand, it's like, wait a minute, he just healed me. When I'm here to arrest him, well, clearly he's not hostile to me. But no, there's no questioning.
Yeah, that's always interesting. Like, I can imagine one of the most interesting characters in that narrative. One of the most interesting situations is Pontius Pilate having to deal with this situation he doesn't really care about. I mean, it's always kind of unclear what Pontius Pilate's motive is. It's hard to tell whether he's just being a coward or a callous occupier leader. But it's always interesting to see him trying to understand the madness of the crowd, or trying to deal with the madness of the crowd.
Well, I mean, having watched what's happened at some of these BLM protests, right, and seeing how just crazy they are, I think everyone can be a little bit more sympathetic toward Pontius Pilate right now. I mean, because again, the kind of crowds there that you were looking at with BLM, that's like a fraction of the kind of crowds of the people that were in Jerusalem during Passover. So it would have been very similar, like a very similar atmosphere, a very similar kind of situation.
And no Twitter to drive them insane. You just had local leaders to drive them crazy.
Right. So, like I said, I can definitely see why he would be sort of more hesitant, right? And of course, again, right, once they started saying, well, you're no friend of Caesar, you're a traitor to Caesar, that's basically when he sort of gives in to what the crowd's saying there. Because that was not the first time that they had gone over his head.
Oh, and I love how there's an animated version of this called The Miracle Maker, and there's one beautiful scene of absolute hypocrisy where the high priest takes Jesus to Pontius Pilate and says, "This man refused to pay taxes to Caesar," and Pilate goes, "So in other words, he shares your opinion."
Right.
It's very clear that they're holding him accountable to things that they are actually against. It's like the absolute hypocrisy there too.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I talked about this earlier on an earlier stream that I did, but I didn't want to bring it up here, and we'll watch the video. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. So, the video that we're about to watch is from Canon Press, and this is a video that they did about myths and that kind of stuff. But we're gonna watch it, and wanted to get your thoughts on it here, because I think that this is what we've oftentimes tried to express about Christianity and entertainment. I think that this articulates it much better than we have. So let me pull this up here. Can you still see it?
I just see the Skype window right now. Oh, I see it now.
Okay, we're about to play.
The Winter King is supposed to feel like a myth. It's not a retelling of a myth, but it's set in a world defined by the story of Hades and Persephone. When we use the word myth, we're often describing something that didn't happen. Osiris didn't die and come back to life. Hades never stole Persephone. There's no scientific evidence of that. But when we approach a myth that way, we're asking the wrong question. Myths were never meant to be measured on scientific scales. A myth is a story that's appealing to a universal truth, to wisdom that is greater than all of us. As C.S. Lewis pointed out, the really wonderful thing about the Christian myth is that it is completely true. The God-man did come into a physical place and time with physical witnesses. And every myth has some truth in it because they are all shadows of this ultimate myth. Christians can sometimes think that a story needs to mention Christ in order to be Christian. But because truth is universal, we can set our story in any time and any place and have it be true. Lewis does this with Till We Have Faces. It's his retelling of the story of Cupid and Psyche in a Christian framework. What would it look like to have Christ embody the story of Hades and Persephone? In that myth, we have an innocent woman who is, depending on the story, either deceived or stolen by the god of hell. Because of her death, all of creation suffers. She needs to be rescued, and it's this act of bringing her out of hell that sets the world right. Sound familiar? Through myths, through fiction, we can explore universal themes and retell them in a way that's deeply personal. In The Winter King, I'm exploring questions of suffering, poverty, corrupt rulers, and blind faith. and ultimately what it looks like to struggle, to fail, and to be forgiven. Good stories act like mirrors, giving us a chance to examine our own lives and to help us make sense of the world around us. Which myth, which story are you in right now? Are you like Orwell until we have faces, building a case against the gods based upon your own perceived slights? Are you like Eustace Scrubb in the midst of a painful undragoning of your heart? There is truth in the old myths, and when you find it, it will set you free. If you read and loved The Winter King, please leave a review on Amazon.
So what did you think?
Yeah, because when she brought up C.S. Lewis, and that was something that my mind automatically gravitated to, where someone like C.S. Lewis's specific quote was, "If I were to make the idea of sacrifice a pagan story, I didn't mind it at all. I was mysteriously moved by it. The reason was that the pagan stories I was prepared to feel the myth as profound and suggestive of meanings beyond my grasp, even if I could not say in cold prose what it meant." And when it talks, because there is always been this difficult thing about trying to express stories in Christianity, because the automatic default is to make it like a sermon, when really all you need to do is have people living the Christian life without having because there's always been this desire to simply explicitly defend the Christian life, but really all you have to do is depict people living the Christian life, or if you will, as the Fourth Age puts it, the heroic life.
Right, and I think you can make stories to promote Christian values that are defined in a biblical way, where it doesn't have to be about, you can communicate Christian truths even though it doesn't specifically mention Christ, right? And again, it is promoting Christian values. So for example, that there is objective truth, that truth is something that you need to stand on, that even though people will want to accept falsehood, and that they will want to, live in that, as Spurgeon said, right, virtue is truth in action, and sin is falsehood in action. You could make a story based off of that is exciting, that is entertaining, that is engaging. It may not mention Christ, but if it has that idea, right, that very fundamental Christian idea of virtue being truth in action, sin being falsehood in action, truth versus fiction, or falsehood, right, reality versus delusion. You can make a story off of that, and that is a very Christian concept. That is reinforcing a Christian belief, even if it isn't specifically mentioning Christ, right? I talked about this before. We can take concepts like justice and write a story and have characters that actually promote and support justice based off of how the Bible defines justice. Again, relating back that there is an ultimate good, that this is a good that we can know. We can know what is ultimately good. We can know what is ultimately evil. And we can, and by promoting that and by having stories that reinforce these ideas, that encourages, that builds up the body of Christ. And to me, I think that it's really important that Christians start to pursue that, especially the more creative amongst us. And I think that's been a big detriment to the church, is that essentially for a very long time, pastors have basically wanted to make their church members, copies of them. My goal as a pastor is basically to make everybody else like a pastor, right? Rather than equipping them to glorify God in the ways that God has gifted them.
And on a more tangent note, the fact is our stories are just far more entertaining by comparison. I mean, if you just follow the way that people think morality should be depicted, as with like the comic book world with the social justice warrior crowd, those stories are not interesting at all. Because the Christians, it's just the Christian story is the real story, and it's just more entertaining and more engaging.
It is, and well, again, because it is based in truth. Truth is truth is stranger than fiction, but truth is more engaging because we can relate to it. Again, when a movie, is even if it's a fictional movie, right? The way that it is grounded for us is when we know that it has some sort of connection to truth, because it has a sense of consistent rules, right? So, for example, take The Matrix. For people can enjoy that movie even though it's a very it's a very sci-fi movie, right? It has a lot of crazy things that they're doing, but there are rules that are consistent, right? Morpheus says, well, some rules can be made, some rules can be bent, other rules can be broken, but it still has those rules, and again, it follows those rules, or it explains why it's not following the rules. The agents are always, they're always trouncing people, right? Same thing with Star Trek. People enjoy Star Trek because, by and large, again, not perfectly, but it establishes those rules and then it follows the rules. There are, with the with Star Wars, right? Of course, Star Wars started to go downhill, especially with the sequel trilogy, when they started, they really stopped paying attention to the rules, right? When the Force sort of started becoming this thing that it could do whatever, and people started doing all kinds of crazy things, well, again, the whole thing fell apart.
And the most important thing to remember is that those rules were broken to achieve a political end, like a propaganda end. The whole point was like making the Force female, making Mary Sue are all the best character, and it just doesn't work.
No. It's not interesting. It wasn't done in an interesting way, and of course, again, the Marvel movies, right? I mean, a lot of they were obviously very popular, but again, they're Captain America, one of the most popular characters, right? He stands on objective truth. He very much believes in a right and a wrong. He's not a relativist.
And that's what's really, and you could, and quite frankly, the worst parts of Endgame is where they lose track of that. Thor becomes a drunkard, Captain America becomes a little hesitant. But I mean, the Ant-Man is the heart of that story when he brings them all back together. But the worst part of that story is when people lose focus of what they are, which is kind of the whole point, I realize. But that is the important thing, because the truth is more entertaining. Because ironically enough, the truth is more entertaining than fiction, more entertaining than lies.
It is, and it's again, this kind of going back into this concept here that it's okay for believers to have fun. We should be having fun, and that's a good thing, and so we should be having fun in our stories. And again, we need stories, we need songs that are reinforcing these virtues, because this is, it's maybe not so much it's not the foundation of a culture, but it is the wallpaper and the windows and what attracts people, right? Basically, the secularism used these trappings to pull people into a building that had no foundation, because they had removed the biblical foundations, the God-given foundations from that building. But it was still attractive to them because they used these aspects of Christian truth to basically, draw people to it, right? Also with the idea of, well, you can have these same principles and the ideas, but not with, God and that sort of uncomfortable forms of morality and that kind of stuff, right? And of course, what's happened is the building's now collapsed into what we see with postmodernism and critical theory, and all the social justice stuff, to where it's just been a complete mess.
And this is really the reason I think Genesis is probably the most brilliant piece of work ever, whether it be literal or figurative. It is probably the best illustration, because it really illustrates what human beings are and what haunts humanity. When the serpent says, "You will not surely die, for God knows that the moment you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil."
Exactly.
And just to go on the topic of about Christians having fun, I'm always reminded of that one line about vintage screw tape grooves of toast, where he talks about the vintage Pharisees, where he says, like, some were all myths and rosaries, and others wore drab clothes, long faces, and paid traditional absences from wine or cards or the theater. Both of them had their self-righteousness and almost infinite distance between their actual outlook and anything that God really is or commands.
Yeah. And I mean, you kind of take that and kind of translate it, right? Essentially, it is this idea that, well, if you're a Christian, you have to act like Ned Flanders.
Which is funny, because when I was a kid, I related more, even though I was a pastor's son, I related more to the Simpsons than I did to the Flanders.
Right. Well, I mean, that's sort of the stereotype, but again, in this idea, it's like, well, you have to do it. And I mean, again, right, I'm not saying you need to act like Homer Simpson or anything like that. There is something to be said for being responsible, for being disciplined, being self-controlled, but you can do those things and still have fun. You can do those things and, again, still have genuine entertainment, genuine joy from things, and again, you can have that sense of an edge about you as well. That's, the Flanders is very much the sort of sanitized, feminized version of the Christian male, where it's got all of the things that you would like, but it's got none of the edge. It's got certain, I guess, good things, right? Because I mean, again, Flanders is pretty reliable, I guess, but
But he's a bit of a pushover, though.
Right, he's a pushover. He's weak. Which, again, speaking of Douglas Wilson, which, like I said, people are going to be like, oh, you're a big Doug Wilson fan. But man, he had a great thing about talking about pornography. Now, what's funny here, right, is, you and I, we know of particular people who like to talk about alpha males and gamma males, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically his whole point, Douglas Wilson's point is that pornography is making a bunch of gamma males. What pornography does is it teaches men to accept defeat. It teaches them to be defeatist.
In what sense?
Well, because rather than you taking the woman and being with the woman, you're getting your jollies off on watching somebody else achieve victory.
Oh, ow. Oh, that's very true.
So the way that he described it, right, he used the illustration of, you've got the lion eating the wildebeest, and then you've got the hyenas watching the lion. So what the person who watches porn is, they're the hyena watching the lion, acting like that they're eating the wildebeest. So it teaches men to basically just, again, have a defeatist attitude and pretending to be something when in reality they're just, a defeatist loser. They're comfortable watching somebody else have victory over them.
They believe they have power and control by having access to that material when really there's no power in it.
Right. They're watching somebody else have the power and control. And of course, again, right, he even put it in there about being a cuckold. and really, I mean, again, I've said that before, right? Pornography, if you're beginning porn, I mean, you're kind of a cuckold. I mean, you're kind of a cuck in that you get off on watching somebody else get with a woman. Right? That's.
I mean, technically, technically, it's it's a arousal watching your devoted other going for another man, but there has to be another word for that because it's not technically cuckoldry, but you are being incredibly passive. You're being very. There needs to be another word for that, but pornography is far too similar to cuckoldry for that to be that analogy to be overlooked.
Absolutely. And so I mean, again, it very much teaches men to be passive in that regard, rather than being more aggressive. And I think that's been one of the biggest things that's probably neutered men. I mean, there's been a lot of things that have sort of neutered masculinity, but I think that that's been a huge thing that has not been talked about as much. You can talk about laws, you can talk about other things, all day long, and you can talk about things that women have done, but I mean, porn, man, that's because again, you talked about how porn had changed a little bit, right? It's not just like seeing an attractive woman, who's naked or something like that. It's hardcore pornography. It's watching two people having sex live on a camera.
Among other things.
Among other things. I mean, well, yeah, now it's. I mean, of course, again, it's a really. You can go down some very dark rabbit holes.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought, but because I think that one of the biggest prohibition, like the biggest problem that I've learned in my development in the Christian faith is that my immediate reaction to every sinful action is to have that, like almost that very bizarre Ned Flanders, like, oh my gosh, how can you be involved in that, rather than having an understanding of, like, there's that huge divide of, well, those are horrible people engaging in that. No, they're people who fall in sin. You need to help them. They need your attention. They need direction.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, again, there's also this aspect here, right, that we want to sanitize sin, I think, as well. This is one of the things that I appreciate about David Lynch, right? Is one of David Lynch's big things is that you have to see the darkness in order to appreciate the light. And so like that was one of his big things with Twin Peak, right? A lot of people talk about this, how you've got the cool, the nice mundane stuff, right? But then you've also got really dark things happening. And of course, that was partly his intention, is he wanted people to be able to enjoy sort of the mundane, the beauty in the routine and the mundane aspects of life by truly seeing darkness. When you truly see the darkness of drug addiction, of abuse, of murder, and the effects, the real effects, right, that has on people, not the, well, they're dead and now no one really thinks about it anymore, but no, this person's dead and this is having long-lasting effects on their family, this is having long-lasting effects on the community, this is having long-lasting effects on everyone who knew this person. When you really see that darkness, you appreciate just, the beauty and the goodness of sitting in a diner with someone that you care about and, having a piece of pie.
Yeah, probably the only video or feature that I ever saw that actually illustrated the effects of a sinful act was like some sort of. It was way back in high school where we're having like family studies, I guess would be the proper way to call it, and it was a almost like a Hallmark kind of picturesque kind of story about a kid who commits suicide. And everyone responding to it because when suicide affects people because someone does something horrible and there's no way to reconcile it, and everyone just responds to it and seeing how other people respond to it.
Exactly. And I mean, I think even as, pastors have done this for a long time. I mean, up until recently, I guess, when was the last time you'd really heard a pastor talk about how dark and evil sin can be from the pulpit, right? A lot of times I hear pastors talking about sins, and they'll talk about sin in the most, sanitized of way, right? I mean, again, I'll be honest about myself. I've had a tendency. I had to catch this in myself to make sure that I'm not doing this. But rather than, it's like, well, you sin because you got angry at somebody in the car the other day, right? Or you sinned because maybe you said a bad word, right?
Yeah, like it's almost like it's kind of like the sins that you'd see in a Kirk Cameron movie.
Right. I mean, it's those kind of I mean, again, yeah, they're sins, right? But it's like very, very sort of sanitized. It's like, no, what about the fact that you are plotting, you plot evil against your neighbor? What about the fact that, you demonstrate hatred for your boss because you slack off on your job? You don't do your job the way that you're supposed to, because you hate your boss.
Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, that actually reminds me of that one skit from the movie, from that Nicolas Cage movie, the adaptation. Are you familiar with that movie?
Uh-uh.
Well, it's kind of bizarre because the movie is basically Nicolas Cage playing a screenwriter who's trying to adapt a movie into something, and so he goes to this great great teacher who actually is a real person in real life who teaches people how to write stories, and he raises the question, well, what happens when you're writing a story where nothing else happens, where there are no epiphanies, it's more like representative of the real world? And he says, the real world, first of all, you create a screenplay about conflict or crisis, you're going to bore your audience to tears. Second of all, nothing happens in the world. Are you out of your mind? And he gives out all these interesting examples, like people are murdered every day, genocide, war, corruption. Every single day, someone destroys another life, and someone takes another life. And it's like, if you can't find that stuff in life, then you don't know jack about life. And so why are you wasting my 2 precious hours with your movie?
Absolutely. I mean, just as that lady was pointing out in the video from Canon Press, right? Stories are supposed to act like a mirror. They should show the mirror, and so we should be able to show some of these aspects here. If we're going to talk about sin, let's show sin for what it really is. Let it be the mirror that it's supposed to be. Yeah,
people want to see evil like sin as like misunderstanding. When people consciously and want to do evil things. Like that is when you want to hurt someone, you really want to hurt someone, and that needs to be something that it's almost like cartoonishly evil, but. I know that's like almost like there has to be a way to portray this without being like being a super, because being supervillains are kind of stupid. Like Skeletor, I do evil things because I'm an evil person. I just do evil. No, people have powerful motivations, and C.S. Lewis illustrated this greatly when he says demons are motivated by hunger and fear, and that he illustrates them in their back and forths, and that's really missing in not just Christian entertainment, but also, I mean, technically the entertainment's there because you can see evil in other secular entertainment, but Christian entertainment doesn't have this.
No, it doesn't. It's very childish, I think, in my opinion. A lot of times, a lot of Christian entertainment. Well, I mean, even when even if you want to, you can try to make evil sort of look a little bit more gray, right? Where it's like, how are they trying to justify it? But you don't even have to do that, right? I mean, I think the White Witch is an incredible character in the Chronicles of Narnia. Now she's straight evil, right? I mean, she relishes in being evil, but then when you look at her, and you see how she's talked about in the story, right? You can kind of see how she allures people, how she's able to tempt people, the tactics that she uses, right? Even though she's straight evil, even though people kind of know she's evil, they'll still go along with her. And understanding that that's how evil works, right? That's how evil people can work is a good thing. So even if you wanted to do someone who is, you're not looking at what their justifications for their evil actions. We can still understand something about evil by having it portrayed in such a way of how is it that other people are going along with this person that is so incredibly evil. That was one of the interesting things about the G.I. Joe comic, is people, Cobra was able to convince people to join him, and again, being this terrorist thing. And so when you looked at, Cobra Commander, that was part of the interesting, not so much with the cartoon, right? But like with the comic strip, that was one of the more interesting things with him is how he was able to convince people to join him.
What was it primarily like? There was basic, like, did he just compel them from his charisma, or did he compel them through like their needs?
He compelled them through his charisma. He is very charismatic, so he was able to compel them through the charisma.
Ah.
And
I probably one of the only other. I recently finally got around to watching Deadwood. Have you seen it?
Oh yeah, Deadwood's great.
Yeah, Deadwood, because you really get it, because you have a really interesting character personality in the character Al Swearingen. Because on the one hand, he truly is a cutthroat, ruthless, like money grubbing person, but every once in a while he has a glimmer of mercy towards people, especially when it came to the pastor.
And those who disagree,
all those who doubt me, not by choice.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's just the Shakespearean language, like and just the epicness of it all. It's just bizarre, but it really illustrates like how people can be, like how people could always deal with these desire, like their lust and their hatred and their rage, while still carrying on with their lives.
Yep.
And people do. I mean, Al Swearingen does really horrible things, and yet he still carries on. And at the end of the first season, he's talking to Mr. Wu, and Wu is upset that his people are getting accused of false doing. He says, "Come on, Wu, I thought you came out here to get your way. Why are you so interested in justice now?"
Yep. Well, and on that notion, kind of going along with that, right? There was a really good episode of Doctor Who back when it first started, back in 2005, with Christopher Eccleston.
Mm-hmm.
Where there were these aliens, and these aliens were had committed genocide, right? And Doctor Who captures one, and she's sitting there. He's going to kill her. Basically, he's going to execute her because of the evil things that she's done. She's kind of begging for mercy, and she's like, "Well, there was this woman in the bathroom, and I wanted to kill her because it seemed like she was asking questions. She knew too much, and I wanted to kill her, but I didn't. I let her go." And he said, "That doesn't mean anything." And she's like, "Well, no, I could have killed her." And he's like, "No, but see, that's how you live with yourself. That's how you commit. That's how you can kill thousands of people. Is these random acts of kindness here or there, that make you think that you're a better person than you are."
Those little moments of mercy where you can excuse the rest of your behavior.
Right. It's
like I commit mass, like so you'll say like, "Oh, Adolf Hitler was a horrible person, but at least he was a vegetarian and he liked dogs."
Right. You can do these really horrible, terrible things. Oh, but you did this one little nice thing. So see, there you go. You're not so bad. You're not totally evil.
And that's actually a big problem with SJW heroes, or heroes and villains, because and go back to Steven Universe, because Steven Universe was very poorly written, because we have these horrible characters who commit mass genocide, but they have a momentary lapse where they become good all of a sudden. Like, are we really going to forget that they are genocidal monsters?
Right. Well, I mean, that's been a problem in media. Not just that, but I mean, like a number of other things with media. And it's like the people who point that out, they're treated like the villain. I think anime has a problem with that, right? I mean, in anime, you've got these people who are like the villains, and then they sort of turn good or something, and it's like, oh, well, hey, no big deal, right? You've done all these horrible things, but hey, you're a good guy now, so whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there is always that desire to, like I don't like Lily Orchid is kind of a psychopath in his videos, but he does have the point that entertainment is far too eager to make character redemption arcs.
Yeah. And I mean, again, right, there's one thing to sort of ally with a character for a particular moment, right, or kind of recognizing that and liking that, but yeah, it's it doesn't really do justice when you're willing to just easily sweep things away without there being any kind of significant change. Like there is a proper way to do redemption arcs, and I do like redemption arcs. I mean, Paul is a redemption arc.
Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen right away either, because he had to win the trust over, like, wait, this guy was killing us. What could we really tell it back in?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and over and over again, he has to sort of demonstrate his authority as an apostle. So, like I said, that's a truth, right? And obviously, all of us are redemption. I mean, right? I mean, every single one of us who believe in Christ. So, I mean, that's why they resonate with us, is because they're mirroring that truth. That even someone who is horribly gone, it's not too late for them, right? God can save to the utmost, and so that's why we like it. But there's a proper way to go about that, when you can acknowledge the evil that's been done, and now there's a turning away from that, versus, well, they just sort of it's just sort of looked over, because at that point it's sort of like, well, what's really is evil,
Yeah, because probably the best way for them to handle that, like a genocidal character, is for him to finally realize the evil of his ways, and just gives him and just surrenders himself up to their mercy, because he has to face execution and punishment for all his deeds, and maybe in the moment of that, before he gets paid judgment for it, some other great catastrophe happens, and he has to fight alongside them. But no one ever holds them. Everybody still distrusts him, because he did all these horrible things.
But all right, so moving the conversation a little bit back, kind of away from the entertainment aspect of this in here. Again, kind of going forward and engaging with the culture. My belief that the church should be doing is we need to be seeking to. I mean, number one, obviously, from a very broad perspective, right? Each person should be seeking to glorify God in their life. Each person should be seeking to make disciples. But I think that can look different for people. I think that for some, for a lot of people, it'll look very similar. There is sort of a way, right? And again, for a lot of people, it'll look like discipling their children. It'll be, it'll look like that, right? It'll be teaching their children what does it mean to love the Lord, teaching their children what the faith actually means, and teaching them how to live and why this matters, here's how you are to act. Here's how, these are the values of our family. These are the values of the Lord. For some people, I think that, they can be engaging in culture through academic study. They're the ones that are really, when these questions come up, they can be the trusted source that you can go to address many of these questions. But not everybody is called to that. And then for some people, it is engaging in their creative side. And reinforcing these ideas by writing works of music, of stories, of fiction, of creating paintings that again speak and mirror these values and these virtues in reality, and reinforce them for us in a way that we can take them, we can appreciate them, and of course we can glorify God, and in one sense be entertained by them as well. And of course, then also through those who are called to the ministry, right, through the proper preaching and teaching of the word, through the counseling, and the encouragement, the exhortation there that you're getting from the ministers. And so basically being the body of Christ and recognizing that, there are different parts of the body, and that we need to celebrate and appreciate the different gifts that people have. And again, whereas there will be a lot of overlap, right, there's a lot of overlap. There doesn't need to be complete uniformity. We don't need to be trying to make Christians exact copies of one another. We need to celebrate the gifts that God has given us and foster those gifts and say, okay, whatever your gift is, you need to be doing this to the glory of God, right? If if you're just kind of a family person, okay, well, make sure that you are glorifying God in your job. Make sure you're glorifying God as a parent. Make sure you're glorifying God, whatever. If you're a business owner, right, and that's where you're wanting to serve, by how you're creating a business. Okay, how can you glorify God in that way? Because that is a part of building a culture as well, right? Having a Christian-owned business, a Christian-run business, running that business the way that God has declared to run it. Or again, if you're just starting out as an employee, same thing. So recognizing where people are, what are the gifts that God has given them, how have they been called to sort of engage in this world, and pushing people, I guess, to recognize the areas that they've been blessed. And again, the idea though is that no matter what, it's all about glorifying God. So here's, we all are flowing from the same source, which is the truth of the scriptures and the truth of being Christ. So what do you think going forward?
Going forward for entertainment, or going forward
just going forward in terms of like the church, making disciples, teaching people to obey Christ, right? Engaging with culture.
Well, you're closer to understanding that as a pastor, but as for me and individually, it's really taking stock of what I've been doing with myself and what I should be doing with my life. All my life, I've always wanted to be work in animation. In fact, when I was younger, I always thought I would be going into industry to make movies. And being a pastor son, I thought I would be making movies to honor Christ. And then along the way, I saw how completely absurd that was, or how off it was for me as an individual. But as I got older and realized how more possible that is, because there is nothing else. If you have a gift and you have a talent, you should be using that to the honor of God, even if it's something as minuscule as making a comic strip. And that really is all there is to it. Like you have a talent, you have a gift, you have that, and whatever it is, even if it's something, even if you don't have a gift, you're just an average person who does his job and just does his work, then you can still honor Christ in that, because there is no position that God can't be honored in.
Absolutely, and celebrating that, right? I mean, that's the thing, is celebrating the differences with other people, right? If God has given someone, like, again, the fact that you can draw, again, I should be celebrating that, I should be glorifying and supporting that. I guess that would be the other aspect, is we need to be supporting each other as well. Because, I mean, for me, I can't draw. I can draw little stick figures. I'm not an artist, right? So that can never be a way in which I could really serve the Lord. I could really glorify God, because it would just be a mess. But I can encourage you. I can support you. I can promote what you're doing there. In the same way, right? For someone who's good at singing, for someone who can create music, that's another area where, like, it amazes me how people can create music. Like I can play music, I can sing music, but creating music, it just boggles my mind how they can come up with a tune. It's beyond me to understand that. I cannot do that. I couldn't just come up with a tune out of thin air. Especially let alone just write down the musical notes and arrange it and that kind of thing. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, and to rephrase C.S. Lewis again, God wants to bring a man to a state of mind which he could design the best cathedral in the world and know it to be the best and rejoice in the fact, without being any more or less or otherwise glad at having done it than it would have been done by someone else.
Exactly. And we're talking about entertainment, we're talking about preaching, but again, there's tons of other gifts, right? Some people, have the gift in regards to, engineering, right? And they can glorify God in that way in what they're building as well. Some people have the gift in agriculture, and they can glorify God in their ability to, produce food and to farm in that way. Some people, there's just tons of different ways. The biggest thing is figuring out, okay, what are the gifts that God has given me? How can I use these gifts to glorify Him and to further His kingdom here on earth? So I guess that's my biggest thing is encouraging people again to be who they are, be who God has made them to be, but again redefining the reality of their existence according to what Scripture says.
And to bring it back to the original topic of the election, is that there is a Christian way to talk about your politics and to hold political views and expressing those political views. And there is a Christian way of understanding and presenting those things.
Right, because the biggest thing that people want to say about with the election, right, is well, I can't believe our choices are between Biden and Trump. But it's like, what do you expect from the current culture? How can we have a culture that could produce better candidates given our current culture? We can't. So if we want to have better candidates, we have to have a culture that will produce better candidates. I mean, that's what we always say, right? Politics is downstream of culture. Well, we're getting the politics that our culture is creating. I mean,
it's kind of ironic that the people who promote worthless and disgusting entertainment are all of a sudden shocked that our best choices are Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, again, in one sense, Trump in a lot of ways personifies who America is at the moment in a very general sense, right? He's loud, he's rude, he's ambitious. He does, have when you get to know him, he can be seen as pretty caring. He has an appreciation for Christianity, even if he doesn't quite understand it. He has a genuine love for America, so and for the values there.
And if there's one thing that can be said, especially in his last campaign poster, is he's incredibly optimistic about the future.
Right, he's optimistic, and again, I think in many ways that describes really the state of where our country is. That's not everybody. I think there's a lot of people, of course, who really don't like this country, who think well, it's just a horrible, terrible place, and just everything's against them and everything. And unfortunately, those people are very loud, and they're very much able to try to convince other people. Yeah, and that's where we need to also be bold, right, in telling those people, shut up. No, you're wrong. You just need to shut up.
Yeah, there is a Christian way of correcting someone.
I mean, it's and that's the other thing with Christianity, where it's sort of can kind of get lost a little bit, is we want to be understanding, right? We want to hear people, we want to hear where they're coming from, but there eventually comes a point where you have to recognize, what, you're not being honest here, you're not wanting to be reasonable here, so I'm not going to listen to you. No one needs to listen to you. You're not worthy of respect. You're not worthy of being listened to anymore. You're either worthy of, again, just being mocked or being ignored.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for a number of these people who are, again, the critical race theorists, the commies, all of these people who, who demonstrate their hatred for God and being so ungrateful for the things that God has given them in this nation. To say that this nation is just so abundantly unjust, and the reasons why they call it unjust, which demonstrates a covetous heart, an ungrateful heart, a selfishness.
Oh, and or to put another word for it, they believe America is irredeemable because of their moral superiority.
Right, and that these things are couched are given cover. They're covered. They're put in the clothing of Christian virtues such as charity and justice and righteousness, is an extreme affront to the Lord. And again, they're not really worthy to be listened to. They're not worthy to. They just should be mocked at this point. Because again, they've been given an opportunity to present their evidence, and they don't have any ever. Well, where's the racism? Well, you have to go back to the 1950s, right? Now, are there people who do have legitimate grievances who maybe want to talk about issues of race? Yeah, I'm not talking about those people, right? We're
talking about the people who use those genuine grievances to offer solutions that are not even remotely connected to them.
Right. They're just wanting to push a particular narrative. They are wanting to push a viewpoint in order to get a particular type of outcome. They don't care about what they have to use in order to get it. And they will never be consistent. They will always be hypocritical. And so again, there's no point in engaging or talking with them. Once you figure out that that's the kind of person that they are, time to end the conversation and move on, because you're just wasting your time. But all right, well, it's been a great stream. So hopefully, like I said, we'll be. I know I always say we'll be able to do this more, but I really do want to get back into doing this on a regular event, regular basis, and talking about a variety of different subjects. So we'll try to be a little bit more structured. This one's we've had some decent structure here, but maybe we'll be a little bit more structured next time, and look at a few Bible verses. How can we apply those things? But Luke, have you got any closing thoughts?
Just the main closing thought. Everyone, it's good to be back, and also don't forget to like or dislike this video, add to your favorites, or share it if you really liked it. Leave a comment below. Feel free to subscribe to see future videos, and until next time, may the will of God be your way.
Absolutely. Like the video, comment on the video, share the video, all the fun stuff to promote the channel, go make sure to check out Luke's channel and be promoting his stuff. He's still got a lot of good stuff, and he's been doing some recent stuff too, which has been good. So be sure to be going out and sharing. Again, share this video, like the video or dislike the video, whatever. Comment on the video, talk about it. all the fun stuff. Let us know what stuff you'd want to hear about. If you want to hear about anything from us, be sure to comment on it. Let us know. And I hope that you have a fantastic week, and may the Lord bless you. Until next time.